My pregnant sister-in-law lived with us rent-free, then she threw out all our food, called me fat, and acted shocked when I kicked her out. For the past couple of months, my pregnant sister-in-law has been living with us rent-free. She needed a more comfortable setup for her pregnancy since the apartment she shares with 3 roommates wasn't cutting it. She's 22 and moved to our city about a year ago, right after finishing college, to chase her dream of becoming a model. She actually found some work and started getting small gigs, but everything hit pause a few months ago when she got pregnant by her current boyfriend. They've only been dating for about 6 months, but she chose to keep the baby for her own reasons. Living with her boyfriend wasn't an option because he still lives with his parents and doesn't have his own income. So, a couple of weeks after she learned she was pregnant, my in-laws called my husband and asked if we could take her in temporarily and let her stay for free. At the time, we were happy to help. She used to be this really sweet girl, and we didn't think twice. But something must have changed while she's been living in the city, because the person who moved into our home felt nothing like the one I remembered. I've known her for nearly 7 years, basically as long as I've been with my husband, and we always got along great. My husband is from a small farming state, and his parents are farmers too. He came out here for college and used to drive home every weekend since it wasn't too far. That's how we met, at school. We dated for 2 years, got married, and now we have a 3-year-old son. I always felt close to his family, and he got along well with mine. His sister had always been this quiet, kind-hearted girl who looked up to her brother like he hung the moon. A big part of why she moved here was because she wanted to follow in his footsteps, find her own success, and not be stuck on the farm. My husband and I had already built a life here, so we helped convince her parents to let her come too, even though they were nervous since she'd never lived away from home. We promised to look out for her and said we were confident she could make it on her own out here, especially since the farm life clearly wasn't for her. When she first arrived, we expected her to stay close with us. After all, we were the ones who had helped make her move possible. And for a little while, she did. We helped her find an apartment, gave her a tour of the city, and stayed in touch. But after a couple of months, she started pulling away. Once she got settled, the calls and texts stopped. We figured maybe she was just busy with work and trying to adjust, so we didn't press it. Eventually, we got used to the distance. We only talked on the phone a couple of times, and we honestly didn't know much about what was going on in her life until her parents told us she was pregnant. Still, even with all that distance, we didn't hesitate to help when she needed a place to stay. But the moment she showed up, I could tell something was off. She wasn't the same sweet girl I remembered. She hadn't made it big in the modeling world yet, but you'd think she had with the way she carried herself. She acted like she was above us, especially her own brother, and constantly had something negative to say, from the kind of food we ate to the guest room sheets. It was like nothing was good enough for her. It threw us off completely. We couldn't figure out where this diva behavior was coming from. Maybe she picked it up from her roommates or just being in the city, who knows, but it was hard to ignore. My husband and I tried not to let it get under our skin, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't annoying. I mean, we're not rich, but we live a decent life. My husband and I both work as architects, and we maintain a comfortable home. She wasn't paying a dime for anything, so I couldn't understand where she got the nerve to complain about everything instead of being grateful for a roof over her head. Still, we kept quiet. We'd made a commitment, and we didn't want to stir up any family drama. So we bit our tongues and tried to keep things civil. But all of that changed a few days ago. I reached my breaking point and told her she needed to leave because of something she did while we were gone on a short overnight trip. My cousin was getting married, and the venue was a few hours away, so we stayed overnight. She only had to be home alone for one night. We honestly didn't think twice about it. But when we came back the next day and I went to grab something to eat, I was stunned. The fridge was completely empty. I mean, totally wiped out. It had been fully stocked before we left, and now there wasn't a single thing left. For a second, I seriously thought maybe we'd been robbed. But of course, the only one home was my sister-in-law. When I confronted her, she didn't even bother denying it. She casually told me that she emptied everything out the night before because she was starting a special diet. Apparently, she'd tossed everything in the fridge so she could start some kind of detox diet, hoping it would help her hide the pregnancy bump and stretch out her modeling gigs as long as possible. She knew I'd never be okay with her wasting all that food, so she waited until we were out of town to do it. And from the way she talked about it so nonchalantly, it was crystal clear she didn't feel the least bit guilty. She honestly acted like it was perfectly reasonable to throw away food that didn't belong to her. The stuff she got rid of wasn't just leftovers, it was a fridge full of groceries, all bought with our own money. That's what stung the most. She didn't pay for a single item, and yet felt entitled to dump it all so she could sip juice for a few days and call it a cleanse. I asked her what kind of diet she was even doing, and she explained she was planning to go fully plant-based but wanted to detox first. She added that watching us eat real food while she was only drinking juice would mess with her willpower, so in her mind, it made sense that we should all go along with her new lifestyle. I couldn't believe the nerve. I mean, aside from the sheer arrogance of thinking she could dictate what we eat in our own house, she didn't even stop to think about the fact that she's pregnant and needs a proper, balanced diet. And worst of all, she clearly forgot that we have a young child, our 3-year-old son, who obviously can't live on juice either. Even then, I tried to stay calm. I told her as politely as I could that what she did wasn't okay, and that she'd need to replace everything she'd thrown out. I really tried to keep my tone measured, even though I was fuming inside. But she decided to take things up a notch. She looked me straight in the eye, smirked, and told me she was doing what was best for the family, then threw in a jab about how I could stand to lose a little weight, too. That was the last straw. She had already disrespected our home and wasted our money, and now she was throwing in body shaming? I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just turned around, walked to her room, and started packing up her stuff. My husband and son were in the other room at the time, but they came rushing in when they heard her yelling at me, demanding I stop. I ignored her and kept shoving her clothes and belongings into her bags. I told her she wasn't welcome in our home anymore. She wasn't the same sweet, respectful girl I thought I'd been helping out. She had turned into someone entitled and manipulative, and I wasn't going to put up with it a second longer. If she thought she knew what was best for everyone, then great, she could go figure it all out without us. She clearly didn't need our support, just like we didn't need the stress she brought into our lives. She started crying while I was talking, but at that point, I just didn't care anymore. The past 2 months had been miserable. Every day at home had felt like walking on eggshells. She seemed like the kind of person who enjoyed making others uncomfortable, maybe because she was unhappy herself, but that was no longer my problem. She tried to pull my husband into it, but he just stayed quiet, picked up our son, and walked out of the room. That told me everything I needed to know. Once I had her bags packed, I took them to the front lawn. She kept crying and refused to leave, still not offering so much as a single "I'm sorry." And honestly, if she just apologized and acted like she understood how wrong she'd been, I might have reconsidered. But she didn't. So I grabbed her arm, walked her out, and shut the door behind her. She stood outside crying for about 20 minutes, but eventually, a car pulled up and took her away. Later, I found out it was her boyfriend who came to get her. Honestly, I don't know why that couldn't have been the plan from the beginning. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Right now, I don't feel the least bit guilty about how I handled it. But my in-laws seem to think I went too far by kicking out a pregnant woman, and they've made it clear they disapprove of how I treated her. Personally, I don't agree. My frustration with her had been simmering ever since she moved in. The only reason I hadn't said anything sooner was because I was trying to avoid exactly this kind of scene. But she pushed me past my limit, and I don't regret finally standing up for myself and my home. If anyone owes anyone an apology, it's her. The way she acted was immature, selfish, and downright reckless. But my in-laws refuse to see that. They keep pressuring me to talk to her, to apologize for how things went down, and to try and make things right. But from my point of view, she was pushing boundaries from day one, and she should have known there'd be consequences. We're not saints, we're human beings. You can't just keep poking at people and expect them to keep turning the other cheek. As for my husband, he doesn't really take sides. He says it all happened in the heat of the moment, and maybe I was a bit harsh, but I think deep down, he understands why I snapped. I'll admit, maybe I could have handled it more gently. I won't argue with that. But honestly, her getting kicked out was only a matter of time. If it hadn't been me, I'm pretty sure it would have been my husband eventually. So, while he doesn't think I need to feel guilty, he also doesn't think his parents are being totally unreasonable for calling it an overreaction. He just thinks I could have approached it a little softer. Update 1: It's been 9 days since I asked my sister-in-law to leave. For the first few days, I found myself in constant arguments with my in-laws. Eventually, I just stopped replying to their texts because I didn't see any point in going in circles. If they can't acknowledge that their daughter's behavior was completely out of line, I'm not going to waste my breath trying to convince them. As for my husband, he said more than once that I may have been a little too blunt with how I went about it, and I get that. I'm not denying I lost my cool. But apart from that, he doesn't believe I did anything wrong or that I owe anyone an apology. So we're fine, and honestly, I'm not worried about where we stand. We haven't heard a single word from his sister since she left, and last I knew, she was staying with her boyfriend. If that arrangement is working for her, then great. Our son was a little confused in the beginning, probably wondering why she was suddenly gone. They actually got along well, surprisingly enough. But thankfully, he hasn't asked about her much, so I haven't had to explain anything too complicated. Still, I can't say I regret what happened. I did what I had to do. I'm not going to sit here and beat myself up over it. Of course, we had to restock the entire fridge after she emptied it, and surprise, she hasn't offered to reimburse us. Honestly, I didn't expect her to. But just to be clear, if my in-laws or worse, she herself ever tries to step foot in this house again, I will absolutely be demanding that money. Because I'm not letting that kind of behavior slide anymore. The last messages I got from my in-laws came 2 days ago. Since I've stopped responding, they've gone quiet. But in those final texts, they still insisted that I should apologize to her, or at the very least, try to make peace even if she doesn't move back in. Of course, I'm not doing that. It's ridiculous that they think I'm the one who needs to clear the air when she's the one who acted entitled and disrespectful from the moment she walked through the door. Truthfully, the atmosphere in the house has gotten so much better since she left. It's calmer, lighter, and just peaceful. I hate that things had to escalate to this point, especially because I've always had a good relationship with my in-laws. But if they're unwilling to even try to see things from my side, then there's not much I can do. I told my husband he's more than welcome to keep in touch with them. I would never expect him to cut ties with his parents over something like this. It's not that serious. But funny enough, he hasn't really been in the mood to talk to them either, mostly because every time they call or text, it's just to scold him about my behavior. And he's tired of having the same conversation over and over again. Update 2. So, a week after my last update, something unexpected happened. My in-laws showed up at our doorstep. Neither my husband nor I saw it coming. After I stopped replying to their texts, they hadn't reached out again, so I assumed the issue had finally been dropped. But clearly, I was wrong. When I saw them outside, I had no choice but to let them in. They didn't come all that way just to sit in silence. My son was thrilled to see his grandparents, he always is, but oddly enough, they barely gave him any attention. Usually, their first hour here is spent just playing with him and catching up, but this time, they were all business. After a quick hello, they told us they needed to talk privately. So, I asked my husband to take our son to his room, and I sat down with them, ready to just deal with it once and for all. Unsurprisingly, it was the same old complaints all over again. According to them, I had hurt my sister-in-law's feelings badly and should apologize for how I handled things. They said I had gone too far and, as the more mature person in the situation, I should have taken a different approach. I calmly explained again that what happened that day wasn't just about that one incident. Her throwing away all our food was just the final straw. Her behavior had been entitled, exhausting, and flat-out disrespectful since day one. I told them, if they didn't believe me, they could go ask their own son. I wasn't going to apologize for reacting the way I did, because she'd been testing our patience non-stop, and I had simply had enough. We'd already had this exact discussion before, back when we were arguing on the phone. So, the conversation felt like we were going around in circles. After I laid out my side once again, they went quiet for a bit. Then, finally, they told me that even if I had been frustrated, I should have considered the bigger picture before doing something as drastic as kicking her out. They admitted that her words and actions were wrong, but insisted that no matter what, she's still family, and that should have been a factor in how I responded. I told my in-laws that just because someone is family doesn't mean they get a free pass to walk all over you. At some point, enough is enough, and with my sister-in-law, I'd hit that point. I reminded them that if she had just offered a simple apology, maybe, just maybe, I would have let it go. But she didn't. She didn't even try. That's why she ended up getting kicked out. I wasn't going to fake some apology just to smooth things over. I didn't feel sorry for how I reacted, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. I said all of this in a very clear, final way because I was reaching the end of my patience. They kept trying to paint me as the villain, and honestly, it was exhausting. I needed them to understand I wasn't open to further debate. Thankfully, they seemed to get the message. After a few moments of awkward silence, they just stood up and left, no goodbye, no parting words, nothing. It caught me off guard, but I didn't stop them. It was obvious they were upset with me and how that conversation had gone, but I'd made my position clear. Later that evening, I filled my husband in on everything they'd said and how quickly they left. We both agreed we'd said all there was to say. If they can accept that I'm not sorry, great. If not, that's their problem, not ours. Update 3. So, we really thought the drama was over after their visit 2 days ago. We hadn't heard from them since and figured they'd finally dropped it. We were wrong. A few hours ago, my mom called. Apparently, my in-laws showed up at my parents' house to talk about the situation. I couldn't believe it. They actually dragged my family into this mess just to get me to apologize. According to my mom, they told her I was being selfish and full of myself, and that my refusal to say sorry was tearing the family apart. They wanted my parents to knock some sense into me because, in their eyes, I was being arrogant and harder to deal with every day. Needless to say, I was furious. But the visit had already happened by the time my mom called, so there was no point in confronting them about it. Thankfully, my parents didn't really entertain the whole thing. My mom just told them that I was an adult and could make my own decisions, and that it wasn't their place to interfere. Of course, my in-laws didn't like that answer. They left shortly after but made sure to mention they hoped my parents would still talk to me and help me understand that family should come before my ego. Honestly, I found that laughable. At this point, I don't even think this is about an apology anymore, it's about them trying to control the situation and me not playing along. That's what really bothers them. Well, I'm done trying to play nice. After that stunt, my husband and I made the decision to completely cut them off. I'd been more than respectful, even when they didn't deserve it. But lying to my parents and trying to manipulate the situation like that? No more. I've been doing my best to keep the peace and avoid unnecessary drama, but I'm drained. I can't keep bending over backward for people who have no interest in understanding my side and who continue to treat my feelings, and now my family, with total disregard. We're done. Neither of us wants anything to do with them for the foreseeable future, not even if they eventually apologize. We need space, and that's exactly what we're going to take. Update 4: It's been a couple of weeks since all that happened, and since then, we've blocked my in-laws. A few days after my last update, they messaged me again. They said my sister-in-law and her boyfriend had finally gotten a place of their own, so she wouldn't need to come back, which, honestly, was great news. But they also mentioned she'd left behind a few things in the guest room, and her boyfriend would be coming by to pick them up. I texted back and said that was fine. But then, they just couldn't resist taking another jab. They followed up with another message saying they were really disappointed in me. They also mentioned how awful their visit with my parents had been and how shocked they were to see this selfish and egotistical version of me. According to them, they never thought I'd turn out this way. I didn't reply. I just blocked them. My husband did the same, not because I asked him to, but because he was sick of the whole thing, too. I'm sure they'll still blame me, though. 3 days ago, her boyfriend came by to collect her stuff. What surprised me was that she came with him, but she didn't come inside. She just stood outside the house, watching. When he came out with her box of things, she checked everything like she thought we might have stolen something. It was so dramatic and unnecessary. But once she was satisfied, she finally left, and we closed the door behind her. Hopefully, that's the end of it. I really don't care anymore. All that matters is that I have my husband's support. That alone tells me I did what was right. Their opinions? They don't matter anymore. I'm happier now without all that chaos in my life.